an honor
to lift our voice and sing
to the living God. No one can deny that Jesus Christ
is the Most High. Let's go.
Yo, God is for us. That changes everything. Listen to me. We came out of these last two series. We've talked about worship. We've talked about being a church member. And what God began to say to my heart is that coming out of the fast, that there were a lot of attacks being waged in the spirit against people in this church. Now, while I know that, because we talk about what a fast is and about what it's supposed to do and what to expect coming out of a fast, God began to speak to my heart, and he began to say to me that we need to talk a little bit about encouragement. We need to talk a little bit about getting over obstacles. We need to start understanding what God has said to us. What does he say in Romans, the 28th verse, that verse that we just heard? If God be for us, who can be against us? And everything that's happening in your life is for the good.
Praise God.
Of those who love God. You.
Thank you.
And I don't care how hard things are in your life. Listen to me. There's one promise that you can bank on. There's one promise that you can take to the bank. Everything that's happening in your life is for your good because you worship a God. And listen, he can't say something that he can't keep.
Come on.
Well, God began to say to me, he began to say that we've been doing too much running and we've been doing too much, too much sitting. We've been doing too much resting and too much working. We've been doing too much on the ground. And what he began to say to me is that we need to understand that in order for us to get over some of these things that have come and began to attack us, that it's going to require us to soar over them.
Yes, sir.
So we're going to start a series today. And the series is called Soaring Like an Eagle. We're going to tear this thing apart. We're going to look at what God says, the power that we have. You know, he compares us to an eagle. He could have compared us to a turkey. He could have compared us to a peacock. He could have compared us to a pigeon. But he compares us to an eagle. And the reason why he compares us to an eagle is because of the power, the ability that bird has. That bird is so amazing. We're going to pull that whole thing apart over the next couple of weeks. But today I want to start here. I want to start with this thought. And that is waiting to soar. When God started to give me this series, the first thing I thought is that we're going to come in here today and we're going to leave out soaring. And what God said to me is that that's not how it works. Okay. See, an eaglet, a little baby eagle, he doesn't just come out able to soar. What happens is the mother and the father, they work together to build this huge nest. Sometimes the nest is 5-9 feet in diameter. And those eggs are born inside of that nest. Inside of that nest, listen to this, the father has gone out and he's killed all types of rabbits and all types of animals with fur, and he's taken that fur and he's lined the bottom of that nest with that fur so that those eaglets would be comfortable. Now, over time, that eaglet begins to grow. And one of the things that happens is that when you're inside of a nest all day long, that little bit of fur on the ground doesn't help you out, because the bigger you get, the more you start to feel all those thorns and all those sticks poking you in that nest. The father even comes in at some point and begins to take out the fur. Now the eaglet, he can't leave yet. He hadn't grown all of the feathers that he needs in order to be able to fly at this point. But what's happening is the father is beginning to make his nest uncomfortable.
Say it again. Come on.
See, some of what happened coming out of the fast was that you began to grow spiritually. You're not the same person that you were before the fast. And now some things that were always present, they were always, listen, those thorns, those sticks, they were always there. But at one particular time before the fast, you had all this cushion up under you. You were smaller. You were just laying around. Let me tell you another thing that the father begins to do. He stops feeding the eaglet regularly as he gets older. And so the eaglet sees him, flies in with food, but the father eats it himself. He doesn't give it to him every time. And what this is starting to do is it's starting to push that eaglet to get ready to do what? To get out of that nest and to soar. But he's not ready to soar yet. There's a waiting period. There's a waiting period that we all have to go through in every situation in our lives. Listen to me, single folks. There's a waiting period. You're just feeling uncomfortable now being single, but there's a little bit of a waiting period. And then God is going to give you the promise. He hadn't forgotten about you yet. Married people, there's a waiting period. I know it's hard sometimes. You start to feel those thorns, and they actually feel like real sticks, don't they? But there's a waiting period for your marriage when you're in the nest. You don't have everything that you need to be able to jump out and run away and do your own thing, but you need to be waiting patiently inside of that nest. Kids, there's a waiting period for you. There's just some things that you're not ready to go out and do yet. And the reason why your parents are keeping you there, I know you feel the thorns and the sticks, and I know you feel like you're ready to run out and jump off the cliff, but you don't have the feathers yet. And if you jumped off right now, you do great damage to yourself. And what we learn from that eagle is that we have to learn how to be comfortable in a waiting place. And this is hard because we stay in America and we've got the internet and a microwave, and now we believe we can have everything in 30 seconds.
That's right. That's good. That's true.
Stuff that you used to have to study 4 years to get a degree to know, now you can just Google it and it's right there in front of you. You know, you get a whole meal now in the microwave. Probably most of the stuff you eat during the daytime is in plastic, and you take it out and put it in. So this concept of having to wait on God or having to wait on anybody is foreign to you. But this is a core principle, especially of Christianity. This is a core principle of who we are as Christians. We have to be able not only to wait, but to wait patiently.
Yes, sir.
Let's look at some scripture real quick. I want to start by just telling somebody today that God sees you waiting. He sees you. I know you feel like you're just waiting, you need help, you've been praying, you've been doing everything, you fasted. You've been waiting, you're just waiting on God to come down and reach down and to pull you out of your situation, to save you, and He hasn't come yet. And what I want to tell somebody today is that God sees you. There's somebody with an ailment, with some sickness, and you've been waiting and you've been praying and you've been going to the doctor and they haven't been saying the thing that you want them to say. But listen, God sees you in your waiting. And what happens right here in this verse of Isaiah that we're about to cover, Isaiah and the Israelites at that particular time were in captivity. And they were starting to get to a place where they doubted the promise. They didn't believe that God was going to ever take them out. They felt like they were going to all die in captivity, and that the God that they had trusted for so long was not going to come and help them. And my guess is for some of us, for some of you, for me, there are times in our life when we feel that the promises that we've heard God clearly say to us are not going to come to pass. And what I want to say to somebody today is don't give up.
Say it again.
Don't quit right now.
That's right.
Just wait on the Lord because the Lord sees you. Let's look at some verses real quick. Isaiah 40. Look at that verse 27. He says, O Jacob and Israel, why do you say my way is hidden from the Lord? Why would you say that? I took your parents out of Egypt, didn't I? And then I got them through the wilderness, didn't I? Why at this point would you believe that I would not be able to help you or to see your situation? He says, my God does not think about my cause. And what he's referring to is that the Israelites at that time had began to complain, man, we're in captivity. You know, God's forgotten about us. He's neglected us. He's not going to save us. He's not going to be there for us. In our situations, I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my car. We're going to get a divorce. I'm going to lose my child. Sometimes you can be in captivity for so long, and you can hurt so bad that it begins to make you doubt the God that has saved you so many times in your past. He says, have you not known? Have you not heard? The God who lives forever is the Lord. Now, we're not just talking about one of those little guys where somebody took a knife and took a piece of wood and created some kind of an idol. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the living God. The one who made the ends of the earth. He made everything in it. He said, let there be light. There was light. Can that God not speak to your situation? I don't care what you're going to. Can he not speak to your situation and immediately turn it around for you? He says he will not become weak or tired. Not this God. His understanding is too great for us to even begin to know. We can't even begin to fathom what God, listen, you cannot, I'm talking to somebody, you cannot even begin to imagine what God can do in your situation. So somebody's suffering right now, and you cannot even begin to imagine the outcome that you have dreamed. God can do it even bigger than that. He says, talking about this God, he says he gives strength to the weak, and he gives power to him who has little strength. Now listen to that now, because somebody, you feel like you're up against all odds. You feel small in a very big world. You feel like the things that you've got to overcome are way too big for you. But let me tell you something. We serve a God that's able to give you strength in your weakest state. Matter of fact, he says, where you are at your weakest state, that's when I'm at my strongest state. He says, and he gives power. How many of you guys need some power today? He says, even very young men get tired and become weak, and strong young men trip and fall. But those that wait, those that can sit in the nest when they're not ready to fly, those that understand the promises that you saw, you understand that the promise that God made you, you can see the promise, but you understand that waiting is the period between where you are today and the promise that God gave you. And instead of jumping out that nest, jumping off that cliff and killing yourself, you wait. He said, but those who have the ability to wait on the Lord, well, they're going to get their strength renewed. Amen. I know you feel weak right now. I know you feel tired right now. But if you can just hold out just a little bit longer, God is going to renew your strength. There are three promises that Isaiah tells us about the God that I serve. And let me tell you something. He is an awesome and a mighty God. Let me tell you something. These three promises, they apply to you if you're single, if you're married, if you have children, if you don't, if you got a job, if you fired. I don't care where you are in your life. These three promises are for you. Come on. The first promise is he sees your situation. I know you feel like nobody sees you. Yeah, he sees your situation. He understands exactly where you are. Listen, they can't touch you without him letting them. They can't take your stuff from you. Listen to me. Nobody can take your dignity. Nobody can take anything from you that God won't allow them to take. He's there. He's going to protect you. He sees you. Let me tell you something else. He has the ability to fix your problem. I don't care what it is. I don't care what's broken in your life. I don't care how many pieces you have to bring to him. If you give him all the pieces, he can fix it. And the challenge is, will we give him all the pieces? Because many times we go to God with, the husband go to God with the wife piece and say, hey, I need you to fix this. The parent go to God with the child piece and say, hey, I need you to fix this. The employee go to God with the employer piece and I need you to. But you got to go to God with all the pieces. Hey, fix me too. Fix my house. Fix my neighborhood. Fix me, God. Yes. But the third promise is that he will renew you I know some of you guys are tired, that you've been pushing through, that things have not come like you thought they would. I know especially coming out of the fast, that many of us had big hopes of change. We grew spiritually. We did. We recognized some things that we didn't see before. We moved into some areas. And listen, growing big spiritually, we began to feel some uncomfortableness in our nest. But the same God that grew you spiritually, he's going to renew you for waiting. All you have to do is be patient. Listen, stay in the nest until it's time for you to get out. You've got to wait on God. And listen, part of waiting on God is listening to God. It's praying and meditating and spending time in the Word so you can understand. Some of us are waiting and we should be moving. And some of us are moving. We should be waiting. And I was telling the Shaki before I came today, I said, this is such a hard topic to preach because somebody will hear these words and go out and make a decision. God, thank you, I was looking for you, and haven't put any time in. And listen to me, your children, they're worth the time that you spend on your knees. Your husband, your wife, is worth the time you spend on your knees. Your community, your mama, your daddy, whoever it is, they're worth the time that you put in and that you spend on your knees praying for clear direction. I'm not telling you to go or stay. I'm not telling you to leave or come. I'm telling you to spend time with God, and if he tells you to do something, you wait on it. And you wait until you get the thing that God promised you, and you wait until you see the promise come true in your life, and you don't stop waiting. If God ordained it, you wait on it. Now therein lies the hard challenge. The question that you have to ask yourself, did God ordain it? And I'm not just talking about marriage here. I'm talking about job. I'm talking about everything in your life that you're waiting on. You need to understand what you're waiting on and if it is the promise or not. Let's go a little bit deeper here. Let's talk about some key learnings on waiting. So what James does, this is the brother of Jesus, and he's talking to Jewish people who would have definitely been persecuted during this time. And he's explaining to them the importance of waiting, because you know what they're thinking about doing? They're thinking about going back to Judaism. They're thinking about, because the persecution is so great, because it's such a struggle every day of their life, they're thinking about quitting, they're thinking about getting up. And what James does is, in the 5th chapter, is he writes a beautiful piece on waiting that's going to answer all the questions that you have about waiting. Let's look at it. He says, therefore, brothers, be patient until the Lord's coming. He starts out by saying, listen, we need to be patient because God is coming. We don't need to worry about the promise. He made the promise and he's going to keep it. He says, see how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and is patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. And what he begins to do is he begins to explain this situation by which, you can do everything that you want to do, but when you put that seed in the earth, God's got to do some work. You can till it, you can do all the things, and you should be doing all the things in your life that you're required to do. But there are just some things in your life that are going to require some supernatural movement. Pray all you want to, and you can read and you can study, but you got to understand that you got to let some things go. They're not in your control. They're in God's control. And so the first thing that we learn from here, from James, is that when the thing you're waiting on is out of your control, you got to wait. What we want to do sometimes when the thing that we're waiting on is out of our control, we want to try and reach out and figure it out. We don't want to wait. We want to manipulate. I'm waiting on you, Lord. Can y'all make this happen? And what James is saying, we don't need to get to the place where we manipulate. We need to get to the place where we really wait, where you just sit there and you wait, because some things just take time to happen. And whenever things are not in your control, and I know that's a hard thing to grasp, because in our mind, everything is in our control. I got Google. But when things are not in your control, that is the time when you have to wait. Let's go a little bit further. He says, brothers, verse 10, take the prophets who spoke in the Lord's name as an example of suffering and patience. And I began to look at that and hear from what James was writing there. And what he's showing is that the prophets all came back to teach us how to do things right. But man, when you read that story, it's a sad story. They came back, many of those guys were persecuted, some of them killed. They came back and they talked to the people about what God wanted them to do to get out of whatever situation they were in and to get back into God's graces. And many times the people did not do it. And what James began to show me is that the second thing of when we are to wait is when people don't respond the way they should. Listen, there are going to be some times in your life when you're waiting on the promise that somebody that you're dependent on in the promise is not going to be doing what it is that God should have them do. And you're going to want to take that child and help them to figure, oh, I'm sorry. And what we really need to do is wait. We need to pray. We need to trust. We don't need to try and change people. We don't need to try to get people to God. God can get people to Him. We just need to lift God up. And He can do the drawing. He's capable. Listen, He's capable of doing the drawing and the pulling and the saving and the restoring. But we spend too much time trying to do the changing and the fixing. And when we get to a place where people within the promise are not doing what they're supposed to do, that is when we just need to wait. We need to do what we're supposed to do, but wait on God to work on them. Come on. Amen, lights. Amen. Verse 11, he says, see, we count as blessed those who have endured. You've heard of Job's endurance and have seen the outcome from the Lord. The Lord is very compassionate and merciful. And what He does here is He gives us an example. He goes all the way back to Job and He pulls an example of somebody who was doing everything right. I mean, Job was doing everything right. He was a good guy, good man. But in an instance, he lost everything. Within 2 days, he lost everything. And then all of a sudden, he had his support group, his friends and his wife to come up to him and to help him out. And they say, curse God. Leave, give up, quit. Yeah. And he still hangs in there. And because he hangs in there, God comes in and with His compassion and His mercy, and He restores him way more than what he had before. Yes, sir. And the third time when we have to wait is when things just don't make sense. When God has given you a promise, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen at all, it just doesn't make sense. You know, that's the time sometimes when we decide to go out and look for a new promise, switch the promise. Maybe God was really saying, no, during that time when things don't make sense, you just wait. You pray and you meditate and you ask God to come in and to clarify and to give you direction and to speak to you. That's it. Let's go a little bit further. He says, therefore, brothers, be patient. So going back to chapter 7, because now I just want to look at it from a different perspective. He says, the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and is patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. Now let's look at this. How do we wait? And the first thing he shows us in that same verse is the way that we wait is expectantly. We need to wait with some expectancy. When the farmer puts that fruit or whatever it is, that vegetable into the ground, and he's waiting, He's waiting up under the assumption that something's going to come out that he can eat. And let me talk to somebody today, because I know you've been waiting for a long time for this to happen, but are you ready for it? Are you expecting, are you doing the things that you need to do in order to get the thing that you've been praying for? If God comes tomorrow and answers that prayer that you've been praying for, are you in position to receive it? Are you waiting with expectancy? Are you doing the thing that you need to do to be able to walk into the blessing that God promised you? Let's go a little bit further. He says, you also must be patient. He says, strengthen your hearts, because the Lord's coming is near. And what he shows us here is that we need to wait with confidence. You need to wait knowing that God is going to do exactly what he said he's going to do. You need to wait knowing that he's coming, that he's near, that he's closer today than he was yesterday, because it's just one day closer to the time in which he's going to deliver the thing that you believe that he's going to promise to you.
That's good, Pastor.
But sometimes we wait and we doubt and we double mind and we ask questions and we confuse ourselves. We get all twisted up while we're waiting. And what God is looking for, he's looking for just a few people who will wait with confidence, who will stand on his word, who will stand on his promise, who will be an example for his promise and his ability to deliver in the worst of circumstances. That's what he's looking for. He's looking for somebody to do that. Let's go a little bit further. He says, brothers. Anytime you say brothers, he means brothers and sisters. Do not complain. Lord have mercy. Is this still in the Bible? I mean, this was all throughout the Old Testament. Then we get tired of complaining through the promised land, and we were in the wilderness, we're complaining, and then now we in, come on now, Jesus then came and died, and folks still complaining? Because I know y'all don't complain, right? He says, do not complain. How much clearer does he have to be about this? Don't complain. And it's amazing, because I've been in two different lines. I've been in the line at the DMV.
Yes, sir.
Oh my goodness. And folk in that line are complaining. And listen, it don't help. It make it worse. It make the line seem longer.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I wish they only got one. Oh, what's she going in the back for? Don't she see all us out here? Oh, I know she ain't going on lunch. But I've been in an equal size line that was even longer in some cases at the Apple store. And I didn't hear a person complain. Matter of fact, I heard people talking about how excited they were to get the new app. Can you believe we're going to be one of the first ones to get the new Apple phone? And I heard that it can do this, and I heard if you hold it with your hand, it'll teleport you into space. What's the difference in those two lines? See, we can stand the line when we're getting what we want, but we can't stand the line, we can't stand the wait when we're not getting what we want. And so the issue with complaining always goes back to you. Ooh, I'm sorry to have to say that. But it's a selfish thing that causes you to complain. And this is the case in all aspects of your life, not just in the line, but in dealing with those folks at work, and in dealing with your kids, and in dealing with your family and your husband and your mama and them and everybody else that you complain about. And what James tells us is, when we're waiting on something, complaining shouldn't be a part of it. He says, so that you, go back. So that you will not be judged. He says that when you complain, that you're going to be judged. That's not hard to believe, because we saw in the Old Testament that when they complained, God judged them. He said, look, the judge stands at the door. The person that has the ability to stop you from getting judged is you. So we wait with expectancy, we wait with confidence, and we wait without complaining. Because we're expecting and because we have confidence, we don't complain. So now I always ask this question: is the juice worth the squeeze? I'm telling you when you got to wait, and I'm telling you how you got to wait, and neither one of them were easy, because nobody wants to wait when things are out of control, and nobody wants to wait without complaining, right? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Let's look at this real quick. He says, going back to that Isaiah first, we're going to close out that Isaiah, verse 31, it says, but those who wait on the Lord, if you just wait, shall renew their strength. God's going to renew your strength if you just wait. Look what he said he's going to do. He says, they will mount up with wings like eagle. He's going to give you wings. Let me tell you the amazing thing about eagles, and we're going to learn a lot about this. Eagles use the storms of their life to push them higher and closer to God. Listen, that's about to happen in your life. You're about to soar on wings like eagle, because what you can do, wait. He says, they shall run and not be weary. Listen, I don't care what you're doing. Amazing thing about an eagle, when he soars, he uses his wings about 10% of the time. He's not doing anything up there but soaring. Now, wouldn't that be nice in your life if you was doing about 10% of your activity and the other 90% was being provided by God?
Come on.
That's what comes out of waiting. When you wait, you put down all the work and the fight and all the stuff that you're doing and all the manipulating and all the stuff, all that effort, and you're so tired at the end of the night that you barely can make it into the house. You can't spend no time, don't want to cook, just want to go in and go to sleep because you're putting too much energy in the stuff that you should be sitting down and just waiting on. Because God will do it. He'll do exactly what he said. He is the God that created the world. Surely he can help you. He says not only that, but they shall walk and not faint. He said he's going to renew you. He's going to give you complete restoration. I don't care what your situation is. You're not going to lose anything. Jesus said, listen, what man can add 1 hour to his life by worrying about something? You know, I like to reverse things, you know what I'm saying? Because you can lose an hour of your life that you can't get back, sitting around worrying about something that you don't have any control over, about a person that you can't fix, about a problem that you can't fix. Or you can just stretch your wings out like an eagle and soar. God's looking for just a few marriages who are willing to soar during this season. He's looking for just a few men who are willing to soar during this season. He's looking for just a few women who are ready to soar, who are tired of flapping their wings like a chicken and ready to just stretch and soar.
Yes, sir.
God's looking for a few children, a few singles. He's looking for a few ladies, few men. He's just looking for a few people who are willing to trust him. That's what this is all about. This goes back to one thing, is that can you trust God? And that word wait can be translated to the word trust. Can you trust God enough in your storm to allow him to deliver the promised thing that he promised you? Can you stay out the way long enough to allow God to actually give you the thing? Listen, I'm not talking about the counterfeit thing. Because when we get involved, we can do nothing but make maybe a good carbon copy of what God really wants to do for us. When I look over my life and I look at the places where I interjected in the promise, it was maybe a carbon copy of what the promise actually was. I got the car I wanted, but they just about took it back, and I didn't get sleep at night because I was up always trying to figure out how I was going to keep my house and how I was going to keep. And you know what I learned through all that? That if I would just wait on God in my marriage with my wife and with my children, if I would just wait on God in my finances, if I would just wait on God with my parents, with my father, with my mother, if I would just wait on God with my grandmother, He has the power, He has the ability, He sees me, and He will fix whatever it is I have going on. And the way I know this is because He's done it. Not just one time, not just two times, many times in my life. I've seen Him do it in my parents' life. I've seen Him do it in my grandmother's life, in my grandfather's life. I've seen Him do it in many of your lives. And let me tell you something today. There's no problem. There's no situation. There's no issue that you will ever be faced with that God won't give you the ability to soar over. So I want to leave this with you this week. I want you to think about this because every one of us is dealing with something, and patience is not a virtue for us. Every one of us has got something going on in our lives, and we're thinking about doing something, crash. We're thinking about jumping out in front and fixing it or taking it into our own control or doing something, and we haven't even consulted God yet. And what I want you to do is I want you to take this statement. I want you to get this into your spirit this week. I want you to pray to God and get clear understanding about what it is that He wants you to do. I don't want you to move at all. I don't want you to do anything without speaking to Him and getting clear direction from Him. And when He gives you that clear direction, I want you to wait patiently on what the Lord has promised me. Whatever He told you, He's going to do it. Let me confirm it. Somebody's wondering. If He told you that He was going to give it to you, He's going to give it to you. Now just wait on it. To God be the glory.
Here we stand in the presence of our Savior.
It's an honor
And it's an honor to lift our voice and sing
to the living God.
to the living God.
No one can
No
deny
one can deny
that Jesus
that
Christ
Jesus Christ